We're going to introduce ourselves first. I'm Bob Bauman.
Robert Franklin.
And we're both history faculty here at WCU Tri-Cities. And we're conducting this oral history interview with State Representative Sharlett Mena and her mother Lucy on July 25th of 2023. And we're conducting this interview on the campus of Washington State University Tri-Cities. So, administrative purposes, could you both please say and then spell your full names, first and last names?
Mm-hmm. Lucy Aragon, Aragon, last name.
And Lucy?
Lucy, Lucy.
Sharlett Mena, Sharlett, last name Mena.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
It's helpful for the transcription essay.
Yeah. So we'd like to start, if we could, by having you talk about your family's arrival here, your family's migration story, when, why, how you came here.
Okay, so that's for
Sure,
okay.
yeah.
I came from a big family in Mexico, from Sinaloa. So we struggled a lot, growing up, like poverty and needing a lot of things, So I moved to the border in Tijuana with my older half-brother. And I went to school. I accomplished to get an accounting degree. But then I was working for this company, Aeromexico, which is an airline. And then they went on a strike. But then during that time, I got married. I had my older son. And then we crossed the border. I had my best friend, and we crossed the border a few times just to work on the fields because I needed to help my parents, and I had 5 siblings under me. So I put 2 to college, 2 of my siblings. And then we got strawberries on the weekends, and then, basically we went like every day, every weekend. Like maybe Friday we were off, and Saturday, Sunday, and we pay, I think it was like $150 back on the 70s or something, just for the ride. It was these big old vans taking migrants or farm workers to all the way to Santa Maria. And it was a long ride, and come back, for the weekend. So we struggled like staying over but I have family in San Bernardino, Riverside, Fontana, so all around those places. So sometimes it was easy just to stay. Mm-hmm. But then when Aeromexico went to strike, and I had a 3-year-old, and then when I heard about they opened the amnesty, Ronald Reagan, the president, and I said, well, maybe we need to go back to this ranch and see if we can get the letter. We can see if we can just cross and stay and find something better, or live in another way, or have more money, basically money, or following, like they say, the American dream. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So eventually we crossed the border, we went straight to the ranch, and they said, yeah, they have some record of us, because there was a lot of people. A lot of people just came like for weekends or for weeks, and we're not constant. Like we work, but we just travel back and forth to the border. Mm-hmm. So then when we managed to get a letter, I was in Hawaiian Gardens with close friends, my best friend, Maggie. And then she goes, what are you going to do? By then, my son was 3 years old, and I sent them back to my mother's house because he didn't have legal papers. I got a divorce from his father, and he didn't want to sign the passport, whatever. So, and then so I sent them back to Culiacan. And then that was a really hard way to live in Hawaiian Gardens. Like the Olvera, Placita Olvera, where the immigration was, it was like lines from here to the highway. It was just a hassle just to put your papers, Besides that, all around Hawaiian Gardens, it was Compton, was really close, Paramount. And there was a lot of gangs, a lot of shootings, a lot of drugs, a lot of drug dealers. And I said, I cannot raise my 3-year-old son in this environment. So I had a sister in Pasco. I never was in Pasco. And then so I called her, and she goes, yeah, just come over, but it was just me. So I came to Pasco in May of '88, April, maybe May, I'm not sure. So I saw the city. It was just like a pleasant place to raise a kid. So now I went to Yakima to put my letter and all my papers, and they just give me like a work permit. And they say, you need to work agriculture. So you can continue getting your permanent residency and blah, blah, blah. So I didn't know at that point what to do. I didn't have a car. I barely had money, like living out of my sister. So then one of her nieces on her husband's side, she goes, well, we can go to the cherry fields, but this was already June or around there. And I thought, okay. So I never picked cherries before. It was okay, but I got let go because I kind of was harassed by the farm workers. They want to help me with the ladder. They want to help me with the bucket of the cherries, like they basically harass me. So then they have this, and I've been trying to remember what farm it was, but honestly, I don't remember. I don't remember the name of the owner. I just remember Juan. It was the supervisor, and he speaks Spanish. So he was kind of like the interpreter for the owner and all of us. So then they offered me tacos every day, and I wasn't working. They basically didn't let me work, So then one day, Juan came, and he goes, we need to let you go. And I didn't know the law. I didn't know the rules. I wasn't around the state. Like, for me, working on the fields in California was just back and forth, so I never stay. And then I said, how come are you letting me go? I need to get money to go bring my son. He's 4. He was 4 by then. And I said, and why are you letting me go? And he says, because you don't let the workers work. And I said, no, they don't let me work. They coming over to my tree, They was coming over offering all kinds of things. Like they have the audacity to say, oh, you're not supposed to be working in here. You're so cute to be cutting this. I can support you, all kinds of stuff. But then I was scared, I didn't know. And I supposed to work on the fields or agriculture. And they let me go in a week. So I ended up with no job again. So then my sister was working in IBP. It's Tyson now. And then she goes, what do you want? I can just bring an application. And it was the 3 worst years because it's such a heavy job. So I started working on IBP. I met her father. We got married. But then, and I still remember this supervisor because it was close to 4th of July. And I said, hey, I had 2 paychecks. I need to go to the border and get my son. Please allow me to go. And he goes, I can't. I cannot let you go. You just start this job and you're new. I cannot let you go. So I start crying. And I said, I just need to get my son. Because one thing was to bring him and another thing is to cross him the border. So then he eventually said, okay, just go, but just come back in a few days. So I just took off to the border and brought my son. And from there, after I had her, and then I had my older son. And then I moved out from IBP. Then I went to school, and I got a CDA, which is a Child Development Associate or something. And then I started working at a migrant daycare. So I started as a teacher, then lead teacher, then I was the program supervisor, and then eventually I was the director or the center. And then around in 96, when I have all the years or all the requirements for INS, then I went to college again, and I went to citizenship classes and became American citizen. Then I went back to school, and I now have a medical interpreter license through the state, and we're here.
But you still work at the school.
I work for Pasco School District. I do test assessment for the dual language program.
Oh, okay. And is that who you worked with when you started in the migrant farm?
No, that was a daycare.
A
it
daycare,
was
okay.
EIRF. It was Educational Institute for Rural Families.
Okay.
It doesn't exist anymore. It was by the Bingo, when it was Bingo City and 20th and Sylvester. No, I mean,
Bingo City.
that was Bingo City in there, right?
Yeah.
And then on the side of the Bingo, it was the office for this program.
Okay.
Yes.
I love Bingo City.
Yeah.
That was Bingo City or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask
Yes.
what brought your sister to Pasco?
She got married when she was 17 in Mexico, and her husband was from here.
Oh, okay.
So she just came with him. She didn't came like me to work or to find something better or to help my siblings, my youngest siblings. She just came as a wife.
I see.
I
Yeah.
have the same question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned when you first arrived that you kind of liked it here, that you thought it was a good place. What was it about Pasco, the Tri-Cities, Hispanic community here that was appealing to you?
It wasn't a small. city compared to LA or Hawaiian Gardens, and all that city scared me. Like all that area was a really, really a bad area to raise a child. And then I didn't want that for my son. So when I came here, it was really quiet. It was a few stores. I remember me walking because my sister lived close to Pasco High. And then I remember me walking to Atomic's Food because they made the fresh flour tortillas. And then I walked over there and I saw people running away from the Migra or the INS. And I didn't even know that that was like a real thing. So in all the people just running, you know. They never asked me anything, but that's why I stayed, because it was in a small community, and I think this is just perfect, just to raise my kid. And I never left. I had plans. I said, maybe in a few years I can go back, but I never did.
So, so then you had a son, and but then the rest of your children were born here.
Yes,
Right,
the rest
so-
of my other 3 kids, yes.
Okay. So, Sharlett, if I could ask you, what was it like growing up in the Tri-Cities? What were some of your experiences, schools, and so forth?
Yeah, so I think the things my mom found charming were the things I didn't like. I'm joking, but it is small and it is quiet. So when you get to that age where you want to evade your parents, you're very findable.
Yes.
I grew up in a small town too. Yeah.
Yeah, but we had lived in all 3 of the Tri-Cities. I call Pasco home because that's where I did middle school and high school, but I started school in Richland, and I think the experiences I had between the school districts were just night and day. So for our family, we lived around the Badger Mountain Elementary School, and certainly I remember seemed like I was the only kid on the basketball team who lived in an apartment, and everyone lived in the big houses near the school, and I was the only kid whose parents had accents, and my dad was a mechanic, and so he would come in greasy jeans, and all the other dads were in ties, and so it just felt like a huge change, like a culture shock when I went to Pasco and started at McLaughlin Middle School, and all of the kids it felt like predominantly Latino and could also speak Spanish and English. But it felt like the quality of education I was getting in Richland had placed me in a high-capacity classroom in Pasco, which was different than the mainstream and was honestly very segregated. So I was, in the mainstream classroom, and it felt like we were learning things that I'd learned a year or 2 before. And by the time I got pulled up, all my peers were white peers. And so all of my social peers were in a totally different wing of the school. And it felt like those differences, you could see them and you could feel them throughout the Tri-Cities, especially between Pasco and Richland.
So you found Pasco a more welcoming place in some ways, right?
Yeah. I found that there were different kinds of restaurants in my neighborhood, different kinds of kids in my neighborhood, folks who had similar family stories, or their parents had just come here, or their grandparents had come here, and definitely felt like a community that I could identify with a little bit better.
Okay. I wonder if we could ask you now a little bit about going to college, education, and what led you to Pullman, and then from there into getting involved in sort of policy and political issues and those sorts of things.
Yeah, so I think for me, college was always a plan, because that was sort of the message I'd received from my mom and from my family members, right? Like, this is why we're here, so we can continue to make progress, and we want you to have the opportunity to go to school. So I was the first person in my family to apply and go to college. My older brother had gone to the Marine Corps, and so when it was, when I graduated, he was serving overseas, and we'd never seen a FAFSA. We didn't know what that was. And so when I thought about places I wanted to go to school, I thought, this is my opportunity to escape to a big city. and my mom said, I don't think so. I think we should think about this whole in-state tuition thing and making sure that you're nearby in case something pops up we don't know about, or we can come and drop off groceries and have you close enough that, we can be helpful. So I'm so glad I went to WCU. It turned out to be the right place at the right time. And there I started to really learn and expand and really think about the possibilities of what I could do. I went in as an undecided major and, took Philosophy 101. I said, this is for me. And my advisor said, okay, but how can we make you employable? So I ended up double majoring. I also studied communications, which turned out to be a really great skill for me. I used to think when I started school, I only spoke Spanish. I'll say that. So in preschool, I was isolated from the other kids and had to have like a special teacher's aide sit with me. And those things felt like deficits to me at the time. But by the time I got to college, I realized this is an asset. I can major in communication. I can use both of these languages and use the cultural bridge. And when I went out to Washington, D.C. to do my first internship, I fell in love with policy. I fell in love with the idea of people coming together to make change and to influence their members of Congress and to really get the outcomes that they desire. And so I took a communications route where I worked for offices with really large Latino populations, in Texas and in New Jersey, where I could put out communications in English and Spanish and build really cool events, Citizenship Day events, free immunization events, getting people signed up for healthcare for the first time in one of the most underinsured districts in the country. But that, love for service really came from my family and from my mom and from the way that community sort of takes care of each other. And you'll hear it, woven in the stories that she tells. But, anywhere that we had family, we were welcome. Anywhere that one of us was doing okay, we were so happy to help the next person. And that's really where this service comes from.
So after college then, at some point you went over to the west side of the state?
Yeah, so I had a long trajectory of Washington, D.C. and back a few times. I went out to work in Congress as an intern in 2011, and I stayed on Capitol Hill for 6 years or so.
Okay.
And then I felt like I really wanted to do some of that good work here at home. So I came home in 2016 to work on a campaign, on Governor Inslee's re-election campaign. I stayed and worked in the state Senate for a little bit, and then I went back to Washington, D.C. as the governor's federal affairs liaison. So working with state agencies and members of Congress, the administration, and trying to get good outcomes for Washington State. And then I finally came home permanently to the west side in early 2019.
And then when was it that you decided to run for office?
Yeah, so I decided to run for office. I first ran in 2020 in South Tacoma area where I live now, and came just 82 votes shy of crossing that threshold. So I ran again in 2020 with support of the retiring member who I challenged 2 years before. And I'm now serving and just had my first legislative session.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was that like for you, the first session? I know you've been involved in politics and policy for a while, but actually that first session of being representative yourself, what did that feel like?
I honestly loved it. It's one of the best things I've ever done besides running for office. So I, in my first session, made 6 laws, which is a new record for a new member. And I say that only to say that, folks from our community are asking for opportunity and saying, if you give us a shot, we'll deliver. And that's what the people of my district deserve, and that's what the people of Washington deserve. And it felt really good to be given the chance and to prove that we can do it.
That's great. Wow. Yeah. I wonder, could ask, and this is a good question for both of you. So I know you don't live here anymore, but you have family here and come back obviously pretty regularly. Grew up here. The Tri-Cities, there was an article in the Herald the other day, 300 and something thousand, so it's a lot bigger than it used to be.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk about, again, for either or both of you, changes you've seen in the time that you've been here, and especially Hispanic community, obviously growth, simply, but anything else you'd like to talk about in terms of the community?
Definitely grows a lot. Like you can see it at schools. We have more and more, like when they opened the dual program, they offered me to come and work as a test assessment. And every year we have more kids. Like Tri-City, Pasco especially, is not like how it was in 88. There's so many stores, there's so many places. Now kids can hide. Because, like I said, we only had, the Sears was where the booth building is for the Pasco School District. We didn't have them all. And I said, if your kids are wandering around, you won't find them. All around 68 is just dunes. It was just dunes. And now everything is in here. So it's just a big, big change over these 30 years. Like a lot.
Yeah. Just to
Yeah.
add on that, it feels like the development, right? And it's interesting the way the Tri-Cities develops because it never builds up to city center. It continues to build out, like
Sprawl.
Yes.
Yeah.
preserve, the sprawl to preserve the small town feel. But, Road 68 developments weren't there. The Broadmoor Mall was very, very slim. But it's not just that. I think, it seemed like for a while, people that went off to school somewhere else were then landing somewhere else. We're all going to Seattle or somewhere different. And there's definitely a wave of young people or people in my age group that come back here or people that have never lived here that are suddenly moving here to work here or just to have a home here and work remote. So I've been hearing more and more of that, which is really interesting to me, and I wonder how that will change the, historic
Right.
culture differences in all three of the cities.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think I see that as well.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we've been asking people we're interviewing is about COVID and sort of the impacts of COVID on the Hispanic community here locally, regionally, maybe in terms of the schools and just communities in general. And I don't know if either one of you wants to speak to that at all.
Well, COVID in my family was a big impact. Like I have a lot of family, cousins in ranch, still living, it's like villages, but it's only like 12 houses and it's just family. Well, one of my cousins got it and 7 died. 7 of my cousins, 7 family members,
Wow.
7. Because when they went to the funeral, they didn't know that he had COVID. And then soon enough, everybody was getting sick. And so COVID is one of the biggest things that happens to my family.
Sure.
What about here, Mom, at the school?
At the school, we have families, especially we have a family across the street from a school, Hispanics, and the father passed. So that was a really big deal for school. We raised money and we raised clothes and food and everything for the kids. He was a farm worker. And obviously, it wasn't a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, statewide we saw higher numbers and higher mortality, of course, for people in the Latino community. And I think it's a really hard topic because it's become so politicized, even though it's a public health issue. And I think, of course, in areas where the politics agree more with not getting vaccinated or not being told to wear a mask, we see those incidents to be much higher. And that's really tough. Because we care about folks and we struggled. There was a Thanksgiving where, the governor had asked us not to get together, and for families like ours where being together in community is the most important thing we can do to fill ourselves up. I had to go home and be alone in my 1-bedroom apartment in Tacoma.
Yeah.
And so it's been hard on everybody, but I think the numbers bear out that it's been harder on us in particular.
Yeah.
And the way that you try to reach people to say, you should get vaccinated when there's vaccine hesitancy and historical distrust is really, really hard. And for me, marrying the love I have for the people of this area where I no longer live, but where the people I love live, it's just really hard to see. And it's really hard to see people raging against measures that will keep them and their loved ones safe too.
I wonder, and again for either or both of you, what are any sort of current issues that you see, the community here currently or future opportunities, challenges?
Challenges, yeah.
Those sorts of things that you see that are present now or maybe in the future could be issues. Or really opportunities as well,
For local folks?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
She's like, I'll let you go first this time. A couple things. So one, I would say Hanford is a constant issue that I think about because we are trying to clean it up, but I think there's actually a lot of hesitation about what happens after cleanup. And so I deal with this in my day job at the Department of Ecology, where it feels like the longer that we can make this profitable, the longer that this remains a company town, people feel like they're secure. And so there's all kinds of ideas about, okay, once we clean up, we'll move to clean energy. And that creates a market for jobs here. At the same time, we have tribes that have, ceded lands and have had lands taken from them that would like those areas to be restored. So I feel like, in general, the constant hazard that is Hanford and leaking tanks and all the anxiety we have around it is a continued and perpetual challenge, but also thinking about the future, I think, remains a challenge. Something I think about a lot, too, is my mom's generation and folks that maybe still feel like they would like to go home to Mexico at some point. This is happening more frequently. I have a friend whose parents have worked in agriculture since they got here over 30 years. They're now citizens, and they still want to go retire. And so when I think about folks here and how families may split, or how we take care of people that may or may not be American citizens but are now going to Mexico and haven't built retirement there, or maybe haven't built retirement here, and they have kids who are trying to save for retirement, but we are constantly, I think, thinking about ourselves as a family unit and how do we take care of each other intergenerationally while continuing to move forward for ourselves. And I see that tipping point is coming really soon for folks in my age group.
Interesting. So a lot of our students, you would recognize they're first gen, right? They're
Over half.
over half.
Over half of
Wow.
First gen,
Yeah.
over half Latinx. Many of them have a similar story to yours.
Yeah.
Parents came here from Mexico or from El Salvador.
Central America.
Yeah, places like that. So thinking about that, I wonder if there's anything you would tell some of our students, who are sort of in the position now that you were a decade ago or whatever,
Yeah. Like they're here and they want to move forward, but this is an uncomfortable space for them, or kind of maybe not uncomfortable, an unfamiliar space for them. They're facing those challenges that you faced. What might be your advice for those students?
I guess I would say first and foremost to them that they belong here. This is for them. I think that's probably the biggest mental barrier that I faced, is whether it's been explicit or implicit that maybe I don't belong here. That stuff starts to seep in. So that's the first thing, is you have to have that confidence and you have to have that strength in your own individual mind, but also build community. I got through school because I was put into the College Assistance Migrant Program for students like us, and it built a network of family. One of my best friends came out of that program with me, but having someone that understands you when you're going through something that is very unique sometimes is enough, even if they don't know what to say. And I still face those today, right? Every step that I get to advance, I find myself sometimes to be the only one or one of very few. And I'm exhausted all the time. I just talked to my best friend yesterday, and I said, why am I taking an hour-long nap in the afternoon? And she said, because what you're doing is unprecedented, and what you're living through in the state legislature is different than what everyone else is living through, and a lot of people are looking at you, and a lot of people are relying on you and depending on you, and you're also doing things with all this different baggage and history and had to run through so many hurdles to get to where you are that many people didn't, so they're not as tired. So take a nap.
I do this because I'm old.
I want to take a nap.
You got two
You
little
can't.
kids.
Yeah, you can't leave two toddlers
Yeah.
by themselves. To
Your
take a
day is
nap.
coming. They will get old enough.
Someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have one more question. I don't know if you had.
No, go for it.
I wonder if you could kind of talk about each other for a little bit.
Oh, I would love that.
So, Charlotte, if you could talk about your mom and what you learned from her growing up and what you've sort of taken from her experiences and advice she may have given you, that sort of thing. And then Lucy, talk about Sharlett and what you see in her as a adult woman who's state representative and So
I think you know what you've done, Bob. It's going to be a waterworks up
there
here.
may be Kleenex.
I guess I don't even know where to start. I credit my mom with so many of the values that I carry forward, and for instilling that heart for service in me. But just to hear her story, and every time she tells it, I learned several new things today from early in the journey. But I mean, hard work, love for community, strength, and I think the one that is the most complicated feeling for me is that resilience, because it's really my goal to make sure that we can make systemic changes that don't necessitate us being so freaking resilient all the time. But nevertheless, this is the world that we live in now. And so to see how far she's come and how much work she's done, it's really liberating in so many ways. It's really empowering. I think, it's not common to hear of women in my mom's generation having so much freedom and autonomy and strong will. It's, women have not really had that opportunity. So she's broken so many glass ceilings in her own right by just doing the things that are right for her and not waiting for permission. And I think, I carry that with me wherever I go, maybe a little strongly at times, and I don't regret it.
Well, I think, I'm so proud of what she became. Like, I only had one, and I said, this is a good one. It's only one.
She got it right.
I got it right. No, growing up, she was like a tough kid. Like, she was independent already, but at some point, I still need to work on things, like raise her, teaching her. But I think I taught her to be independent, to work what he wants. If she wants something, she needs to work for it. Nothing is free. We fail, we get up and we move forward all the time. You are not going to fail and stay on the ground. You're getting up and you keep moving forward. And I'm just so proud. She's just amazing, an amazing person. She's such a hard worker. She cares for people, community, family. And if I will have to do my journey again, I will do it. I have no regrets. And every step and every hard thing and every work, everything that I did is worth it. And sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
Andy, did you have anything that we didn't address that you wanted to?
Yeah, thank you. That was really lovely. I think the parts that really stood out to me were this piece at the end, talking about each other, and then you said, Sharlett, you're from a community that really takes care of each other, and so I wonder if you could elaborate a little on what that family, that community thing is, that is so special, and how you see it in your own community or not, and then maybe some of the work you're doing too. You mentioned 6 laws.
Yeah.
So maybe
Talk about them?
maybe if that segues in at all, that sense of community, perhaps you could talk if there's a law, if there are a couple that you're most proud of.
Yeah, I would love to talk about me. Yeah. Yes, so I used to tell this story on the campaign trail, but my mom has shared with you, some of her background and, sort of the conditions that would necessitate you leaving home, right? Like not having enough food on the table. And so I used to share this all the time, that there's a phrase that she told me really early on, which is, donde come uno, comen dos o tres. And what that means is, where there's enough for one person to eat, there's enough for 2 or 3. And to me, that's just so emblematic of the generosity of heart that we have, where you may not have enough, but you're still going to share it. And so that made me a little bit emotional. But just, that's how we lived life. That's how we lived in community. My mom talks about coming here and, sending my brother to live with, her parents for a little while. And there's never been a time where I really lacked for something that community didn't show up to provide. And so even in running my first campaign, I did something pretty wild. I decided to run against an incumbent of my own party I felt like there was a need for new energy. There was a need for that kind of generosity in a community that is majority people of color. You know, people are struggling. They're struggling to afford milk, let alone gas. And so I felt like we needed someone to put voice to that. And, you know, that's a really hard thing to do in any political climate, and to say, I'm a young person, I'm Latina, I've never been elected before, but I want your vote. But my mom was out there making enchiladas and trading them for donations. My older brother, who got his accounting degree here, you know, he stepped up to be my treasurer free of charge. My brothers would come out and canvass with me. And, you know, the community, we would go around the community in South Tacoma and East Tacoma and in the district, and we would say, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing, can I put up my yard sign here? And their pride for someone they didn't know was just all over. They would say, échale ganas, you know, like, we're so proud of you, like, wow, one of our own is going to do this thing. And so I'll just say, I think, you know, we may lack resources, but we've always had the most valuable resource, which is each other. Oh, I'm getting too emotional to continue. So let me transition then. So I was, like I said, I had a really fruitful year, and I got to work on some laws that I thought would really benefit people in my community and across the state. And one of those that is the most precious to my heart is it's a utility shutoff moratorium during extreme heat. And what that means is people that can't afford to keep their power and water on during extreme heat, which is just ravaging the state and the country and the world, will still get to have that life-saving measure. And that was actually a really difficult bill to pass, as you might imagine. We've got utilities that have a lot of interest and a bottom line, and we had a lot of utility representatives that really wanted to do this, but also, you know, the fine details. And so to keep those people in mind and think about what happened in 2021, where we lost almost 160 lives across the state, and most of them over the age of 65, was really hard.
Right.
And to think about, it shouldn't matter. We have the ability to provide people power and water, and they need it, and when they need it the most. And so that's one of those things that got across the finish line that made me very, very proud. I'll mention one other or two other bills.
That'd be great.
Another one that I worked on with my ecology background that was really important to me it's called the Toxics Free Cosmetics Act. And when we're talking about cosmetics, we're not just talking about mascara and lipstick. We're talking about anything that's a personal care product, like shampoo, deodorant, things that some folks would deem luxuries, but we know are basic necessities, especially if you're, you know, out there every day. What this bill does is it bans 9 chemicals and classes of chemicals, including PFAS, including formaldehyde, lead, things that we know cause people harm, have been causing people harm, are known carcinogens, and making sure that when you go to the store and you pick something up, that it actually is safe to use and that the burden isn't on the consumer, who may or may not know how to read a 15-syllable word that actually means toxic. So that was a really, really, really hard lift. There were a lot of big money companies that don't want to spend the money or the time to reformulate and don't want that burden and responsibility. But actually, we have so much data on this, and we know that some of the most toxic chemicals are targeted toward people of color, especially Black women. We're talking about maybe hair relaxers. You know, the Department of Ecology did reports on makeup, and the darker pigmentations actually have more of those nasties in them. And so that was a really weird, complex, and tough fight, but because of that, we're going to have clean cosmetics in the state of Washington, and we're not going to be, you know, sunscreen, things that hurt our kids. And I'll end on a high note, which is this one is one of the most important to me. It's the Washington Voting Rights Act. I worked on a bill to make some changes that will make it more accessible for community. And the reason this is so important, and you may know this because you live in the area, but there are election structures that disadvantage, you know, minority communities. And because of that, we saw litigation in Yakima under the Federal Voting Rights Act, and then Pasco said, sue us next. We would like to be sued so we can restructure from at-large to district-based elections. And Yakima, that change yielded the first 3 Latinas ever elected to city council representing their own community. In Pasco, we saw some changes, and what the original Voting Rights Act did in the state of Washington was allow those changes to be made voluntarily. But we still have communities that are seeing these unfair election structures and don't have the resources to make those changes. So this lowers the barrier by allowing for cost recovery. It allows groups to form coalitions. So say you're in the area and you want to be a cohesive block of Black voters, Latino voters, and Native voters to bring a case. And I think ultimately and bottom line, because I've been getting really wonky, is this is just going to allow people to have more of a say, to have fair election structures, and to elect their own leaders so that they can advocate for themselves at every level of government.
Yeah.
That's great.
They can trust their leaders too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's important. Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't asked you about or haven't talked about, anything we haven't raised that you think would be important to talk about?
No?
I don't think so. Anything else from you guys?
I don't.
One,
Anything more?
Oh, yeah.
One section that I wanted you to repeat, if you would, Charlotte. You mentioned you ran in South Tacoma in 2020. You were just shy of 82 votes shy, and then you ran again and won. Was it in 2022?
Yeah, in
Okay, would you mind
2022.
just saying that sentence again? I feel like either I didn't hear it or you said 2020 twice. I could be wrong.
I think that
I
might
think
be
I
right.
said 2 years later.
I think you might have said 20.
Oh, okay. Oh, Bob, you threw me under the bus. Play back the tape.
Yeah.
Just so you can splice it in. and reuse
Yes,
that, yeah.
yes. So in 2020, I ran for office for the first time and came 82 votes shy of advancing. And then I ran again in 2022 with support of the person I challenged 2 years prior, and was elected in November of 2022.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So we talked about how the Hispanic community and the larger Tri-Cities community has obviously grown in population size over this year. Has the makeup of the community changed? Where people are coming from, what people are doing for work? Has the range of employment expanded? Has where people are coming from? How has that changed, or has it changed in the last 30 years since you've been here?
Well, a lot of the people that I know, some are still working for Tyson, some are still working on their fields, but a lot of the people are moving on, like maybe to schools or maybe to find different things to do. But a lot of the community is still working on the fields or Tyson.
Where does Andres work?
Andres, I'm not sure.
I feel like there's more technology. I mean, you guys obviously would know better, but it feels like there was no
I mean,
Amazon
the new
back
generations,
then.
yes.
There's all these new technology companies, and it
Yeah,
feels
the new
like
generations, yes. But I'm talking about kind of my generation.
like
Right.
new migrants continue to go into the same.
I think so. Yes, I met some families. They just came, let's say, 2 years ago, and then they're on their 40s or 50s, but they just go straight for the fields. Or I don't know how is that. I don't know if they have the papers or not, or I don't know why.
Right.
But this comment for some new people coming, just look for a farm job or Tyson or those the potato factories.
Oh, Lamb
Weston.
Lamb Weston.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
So still
Latino people.
largely in agriculture.
I think
then.
so.
Yeah.
Whether it's picking or processing or whatever.
It feels like Pasco changes less, right? It feels like all the
Yeah.
new technologies and companies and warehouses and such are going to different areas where it feels like Pasco has always been farmers
Oh,
and farm
yes.
workers, and it seems like
Yeah.
that doesn't change very
Not
much.
as much.
No, what's funny, you see those giant Amazon buildings that have gone up,
Yeah.
and but you look at the jobs there, and it's just labor of it. It's not in the fields, but it's kind of
Labor.
that same style of like exploitive, just hard drudgery work that is going to just wear people down. Just the way that Amazon's structured, and it does seem that like, well, now it's inside, I guess, But is that the big change that's happened?
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right.
I think one thing that it changed is, I think from the last 10 years, 15 years, some farm workers are getting a special visa, like to come to the States legally from March to November. Because I
They're
know a lot of people,
H2A,
something like that. They call them
seasonal.
seasonal
Right.
workers, seasonal farm workers. So it makes it easy for some of these families. And I met a few. They just the father or the son or one of the adult families just come from March to November, send the money to Mexico and save all the money they can, and they have to go back in November by some date. They need to be in, I think, El Paso border, and they
Wow.
need to get like a stamp from INS.
INS. Huh.
That way, the next year they can come back in March. So that's
Okay.
something that people think is really good for these families. Just they're not illegally. They're not
Right.
jumping the border or
Right, they're not that INS fear all the
they're
time.
not.
Right?
Now they
'Cause
can work
have-
on the fields, yes.
yeah.
Like legally. Contratados. Yes,
And
contratados.
they didn't always do seasonal farm work?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think these visas, they're not like a long time since they implement them. I think it's 10, 15 years. Because my father did this, but he didn't have any, something like that. So no. So he just jumped the border.
Yeah,
I don't know that. I mean, so some of the legislators, and we now have like a legislative Latino caucus, and we're really interested in getting some of the farm worker tours. But it sort of depends on who you're talking to, what information you're going to get, and who's around, right? I mean, there are people that we know that are on these seasonal visas, like Victoria's relative.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't know how much has changed, right? It's like he's on this agricultural visa and they'll ask him to do construction work. So
Oh.
they'll bump his pay, but he's not really getting paid what a construction worker would be paid here.
Yes,
And so
right,
I
sure.
say,
It's
you
not
know,
union
that's
job
not,
or-
you
yeah.
could get her and you're not, it's not a part of your visa and your employer knows
Right.
that, but your visas are tied to one specific employer is one issue. So people don't
Yes.
have recourse to leave and find better work or have competitive pay. And the other
Yeah.
is they still make more money to send home. So it's, you know, it changes it changes forms, but
Yeah.
it feels like there's still a vast issue that has not been handled at the federal level.
This kind of sounds just like a permutation of the Bracero program.
Right, it
Yes,
is.
Just another,
it
it's
does,
just
right?
another form.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Like guest worker, but it's like seasonal. Or
Yeah, I mean, if it's
Right.
reoccurring, you basically set
Right.
up this
Right.
system of dependency where people would kind of come and depend on that wage, but be locked into a structure where they really have little agency.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
And they
You're
don't
saying
have
it better.
They don't have full protection.
You said it pretty good.
Might have-
Just
yeah,
repeated it.
yeah, don't
Yeah.
have full health care protection or
Right, right.
Yeah.
workers' comp or anything like that. Yeah. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right.
One last question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
We are not, yeah, we're
Okay.
totally fine.
And then this is for you again, Lucy. I just was wondering, when you chose to leave Sinaloa and your family, you said you went to Tijuana. What was it about Tijuana? Why did you go to Tijuana? Was it family?
Yeah.
Was it being close to the border or more economic opportunity?
One of my half brothers lived on the border.
Oh, okay.
So in Sinaloa, especially in Culiacan, it was a lot of violence. Like, it was a lot of drug dealers back then. Like a lot.
Even
now,
then? Or
yes, but even
back
then, yes.
Oh,
I
wow.
was 14 when they tried to pull me in a car twice. I was saved by one old lady on the street, and the next time I ran on the opposite way of the car. And my sister lived like 3 blocks, so I ran and I ran and I ran, and I was knocking on the door. So my brother-in-law came out, and he took me back to my parents. So then my mom and my dad, because I was the oldest of them, of their marriage, and they go, no, we should send them away because they're going to take care. I was only 14. So then I end up in Tijuana with my half brother. We never planned to be in the border or anything like that.
Gotcha.
It was just for safety issues. I end up in the border. Then I went to school there, and then back then they give us like a passport. It was like kind of like a license, and it was only good for 25 miles off the border.
Oh.
But then, so to work, we just took off without permission, you know?
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Without
yeah.
permission on the border. Because if you go, let's say you're going to go to Disneyland, you need a special permission from the border. Like they stick like a little paper and it was only like for maybe 24 hours or 48 hours. So you want to come and work, you just cross, you said, I'm going to Safeway, and then you take off and do your farm work and go back. You know, if you're not staying, I guess you're not.
And that was the weekend work you're talking about?
Yeah, the
where you'd be like
weekends.
48 hours?
The weekends,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
The 48 hours.
Wow.
And it was just because the supervisor was a lady from Texas. And she was really nice. And she allowed us to do that because usually they don't want weekend workers. You know, but she said, oh my God, you guys are so tough. What are you guys are doing? We were only 16, 17 and just crossing the border, and we just needed money. And, you know, we stopped at the baseball stadium a few times, the Padres. We were fan of the Padres too. And we say, hey, we should leave Sunday in time to stop and see the game. I mean, that was,
Sure.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
so it was good times. It wasn't that busy. The border on the 70s, 80s, it was good. But then, I mean, a lot of people came and everything changed, and, you know.
Right.
Wow.
Could you talk a little more about your hobbies, your interests, just as, you know, either then or now, or do you still like baseball? What do you,
Oh,
what do you
me?
all, both of you, yeah.
Oh, yes, I like baseball, I like football, I like soccer, and I do a lot of walking, hiking, biking, dancing if I can. I like the fiesta, yes.
You love the fiesta.
love the
Anytime
fiesta.
there's a concert at the
Yes.
track, you're there.
Yeah.
She even went to Pitbull on a school
I
night.
did.
Okay.
Wednesday.
Wow.
See, my grandson was in Central, and that Wednesday, one of my coworkers said, are you going to Pitbull? I said, yes, I'm there. So she goes, okay, can I come with you? Because she's young, she's like 40. And then I said, yeah. So we were dancing the night and everything. So we put up some stories, and then my grandson, he was working at McDonald's in Ellensworth, and then he goes, oh my God, this is my Nana. Oh, she's such a wild Nana. What is she doing on a Wednesday? So he texts me, and then he goes, where are you, Nana? And I said, working. And she said, but you were out last night? I said, yeah, people was in town. Hey.
Yeah. The thing you need to know about my mom is she loves to have fun. She
Yes.
loves to travel. So
Yes.
you will travel every day if you could travel every day,
Oh, yes.
honestly. So one of the things we like doing together is, because you used to run in the mornings, now you just
Yeah.
walk in the mornings,
Yes.
right? So anytime we can go on a hike, anytime, I mean, she just was in Tacoma and found a new park every single day to
Yes.
explore, right? Just being out in nature, I think is something we like doing together. Definitely sporting events, but certainly concerts, and
Yes.
whether it's like weekend travel or we can go back to Mexico to see family, we'll try to make it happen.
I'm an explorer, yes.
Yeah.
Did that help inform your love of ecology? Tell us a little bit about how you went down. Did you say you're an ecologist?
Yeah, no, I do government relations at the Department of Ecology. Yeah. Do you want me to talk more about that?
Sure. If you know, sounds like, did she? I guess you could talk a little bit about if your mom instilled like a love of nature in her kids, or how that kind of career path came about for you.
It's not that interesting. It's not that interesting. I know what you're getting at, but it's like these things kind of developed at the same time, I would say, right? I mean, I think the more time that there was to do leisurely activities, I feel like that's when I saw you do more of them, right? Remember the first time I tried to go camping?
No.
And I said, can I go camping? Kelly's going camping. Her parents are taking her camping. She said, what is that? And I said, what do you think? You get your things.
Overnight,
And you sit them overnight. And she said, why work so hard to put a roof over your head? Why would you want to sleep outside? But I think as time has developed, we've started to have more head space and heart
Yeah.
space and free time to be able to explore it.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank both of you,
Yeah.
Lucy, Charlotte, so
Same.
much for coming here, spending time with us, sharing your stories and your experiences. Really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. This was really great.